For 4 years, I secretly saved every dollar I could. Not for a vacation, not for a new car, but for my dream. Then my husband gave it all away without telling me, and I want to tell you exactly how that happened, because for a long time I didn't understand it myself. I was 28 years old, married to a man named Eric Reed, and we had a daughter who had just turned 3. Eric was 31, steady, reliable in most of the ways that matter. He didn't drink too much. He never so much as looked at another woman in a way that made me uneasy. He came home every night. He played with our daughter on the living room floor until she fell asleep against his chest, and for years I believed that made him a good husband, full stop, no further questions needed. It took me a long time to understand that a man can be faithful and sober and still not believe your dreams deserve the same weight as everyone else's. After our daughter was born, something old woke back up in me. Before I met Eric, before the wedding, before the baby, I had wanted to be an architect. It was the kind of childhood dream that people usually laugh about outgrowing, but I never outgrew it. I just buried it under diapers and grocery lists and the general exhaustion of being needed by everyone at once. When my daughter turned 1, I started sketching again in the evenings, just floor plans at first, little houses that didn't exist, and somewhere in the middle of all that quiet drawing I decided I wasn't done. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to actually become the thing I used to imagine myself being. So I started saving. Quietly, carefully, the way you save when you don't entirely trust that the people around you will protect what matters to you if you say it out loud too early. I picked up freelance work online in the evenings, proofreading, data entry, anything I could do after our daughter went to bed. I stopped buying myself new clothes. I stopped getting my hair done every 6 weeks and stretched it to every 4 months instead. Every extra dollar, every birthday check from my mother, every late-night freelance payment went into a joint savings account that Eric and I had opened years earlier, back when we still talked about our future in terms of what we would build together instead of what I would eventually be allowed to have. For 4 years I did this. 4 years of small, invisible sacrifices that nobody around me noticed because I never made a show of them. By the time our daughter turned 5, I had put away almost $13,000, enough for tuition and books at the State University's architecture program, enough to finally apply and mean it. I remember the night I finally worked up the courage to tell Eric what I had been doing. I told him I wanted to enroll in the fall. I told him I had been saving for years, that I wasn't asking him to give up anything, that I had built this myself, dollar by dollar, without touching a cent of what we needed for the house or our daughter's needs. He smiled and said he was proud of me. He said it so easily that I believed him completely. 3 weeks later, I walked into the bank to check on the account before submitting my tuition deposit, and the balance on the screen made my stomach drop somewhere near the floor. It wasn't $13,000. It was $240. I asked the teller if there had been some kind of error, some kind of fraud, because there was no version of my life in which that much money simply disappeared without my knowledge. She checked the records and told me the transfer had gone through 9 days earlier, authorized from the joint account, sent in full to an account belonging to Eric's younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was 24, and she had grown up watching her older brother step in every time life got difficult for her. A late rent payment here, a car repair there, small loans that never quite got paid back and were never really expected to be. Eric had always been the fixer in his family, the reliable one, the brother who would move heaven and earth so nobody in his orbit ever had to sit with real hardship for very long. I used to think that was one of his best qualities. That day at the bank, I understood for the first time how much it had cost me. I confronted him that night after our daughter was asleep. I remember standing in the kitchen with my arms crossed so tightly it almost hurt, waiting for him to tell me it was a misunderstanding, that the money would be back by morning. Instead, he told me the truth, calmly, like he had already rehearsed it. Chloe needed the money more than I did right now. Her car had broken down, she was behind on rent, and he hadn't wanted to bother me with the details because he knew I would say yes anyway, so he had just handled it. He told me I could always study later. He told me family needed to come first. I asked him what exactly I was, if not his family. I asked him whether it had ever once occurred to him, in the 9 days between taking that money and me finding out, to simply talk to me about it, to treat me like a partner, instead of a line item that could be quietly moved around whenever someone else's need felt more urgent than mine. He didn't have a real answer. He just repeated himself, the way people do when they've decided a sentence is true simply because they've said it enough times. You can always study later, Madison. Chloe needed it more. That was the moment something in me went very still and very clear. Not angry exactly, not yet, just clear, in the way you become clear right before you make a decision you know you can't take back. I told him I was leaving. Not the marriage, not that night, but the conversation, the kitchen, the version of my life where my future was something that could be quietly redistributed without my consent. I went upstairs, packed a bag for myself and our daughter, and stayed at my mother's house for the next several weeks while I decided what I actually wanted to do. I won't pretend those weeks were easy. I lay awake most nights running the math over and over, thinking about every dollar I hadn't spent on myself, every freelance assignment I had taken at midnight while everyone else in the house slept. All of it gone in a single transfer that took less time to complete than it had taken me to earn a single week's worth of that money. I thought about how easily Eric had said the words family comes first, as though I hadn't spent 4 years quietly proving, in the only language he seemed to understand, that I had never once put my own family last. But I also started doing something else during those weeks, something that surprised me. I started researching scholarships and grants for non-traditional students, women who were returning to school later than expected, parents rebuilding a path toward a career they had set aside. I filled out application after application late at night at my mother's kitchen table, writing essays about what it meant to lose something you had built entirely alone, and what it meant to decide, in the aftermath, that losing it once wasn't going to be the end of the story. Most of those applications went nowhere, but one program, specifically designed to support women re-entering higher education after major life disruptions, offered me a grant that covered nearly the full cost of tuition, along with enough for materials and books to actually get started. I read the acceptance letter 3 times before I let myself believe it. Then I called my mother into the kitchen and showed her the screen, and we both cried the kind of tears that don't need much explanation. I formally separated from Eric a few months later. We didn't rush into divorce, mostly because of our daughter, but the marriage as it had existed was already over the moment he decided my future was his to give away. I enrolled in the architecture program that fall, older than most of my classmates, running on coffee and the kind of stubbornness that only comes from having something taken from you and refusing to let the theft be the end of your story. I graduated a little over 3 years later, having pushed myself through extra credits every single semester, because I no longer had any patience left for waiting. I got hired at a mid-sized architecture firm shortly after graduation, and I worked harder there than I had worked at anything in my life. Because for the first time, every hour I put in belonged entirely to me, and no one could quietly take it away. Within a few years, I was leading my own projects, mostly public buildings, community spaces designed around the idea that people deserve rooms built with real thought behind them. The project that changed everything for me was a new public library downtown, a modern building with tall windows and a reading room designed to catch the morning light in a way that made even strangers stop and comment on it. I was the lead architect. My name went on the small brass plaque near the entrance before the ribbon cutting, and I remember standing in front of it the first time it was installed, running my fingers over the letters, thinking about a woman standing at a bank counter years earlier, watching $13,000 disappear from a screen. Almost a year after the library opened, I heard, through our daughter, that Eric had brought his niece there on a weekend visit, Chloe's daughter, wanting to show her the building everyone in town had been talking about. I wasn't there when it happened, but our daughter told me about it afterward, the way children tell you things without understanding the weight of what they're saying. She said Daddy stood in front of a sign near the door for a really long time and didn't say anything at all. I know exactly which sign she meant. Lead architect, Madison Reed. I think about that moment more than I probably should. Eric standing there reading my name on a building he had never believed I would get the chance to design, a career he had once decided could simply wait its turn behind someone else's emergency. I don't know what he was thinking in that moment, and I've stopped needing to know. What I do know is that somewhere in that quiet pause in front of the door, he finally understood what he had actually done the day he moved that money without telling me. He hadn't just taken $13,000. He had tried to take the future that money was meant to build, and it hadn't worked, because a dream that's already been carried for years doesn't stop just because someone decides to interrupt it. Some people will tell you your dreams can wait. The truth is, the right people help you reach them. What would you have done if someone gave away your future?